Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Miriam Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to get started? Then let's get going. This podcast is sponsored in part by the Association of Professional Genealogists. You can find out more about them at www.apgen.org. Welcome to episode 29 of the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head west to Texas to chat with genealogist Lisa Louise Cooke. Lisa, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Hi, Marian. So great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Let's get started by having you tell us about yourself and give us an overview of your genealogy business.
Well, I started Genealogy Gems back in the Wild West days of podcasting, which was 2007, if you can imagine. I think podcasting had been around about a year and a half at that time. And it has turned into basically what I call a multimedia genealogy company. So it's the goal is to try to bring the gems to people. And what I mean by that is just that there's an awful lot going on out there, a lot of noise online, more than anybody can take in. My job is full-time, combing through that and bringing what I think are the best and most inspiring and most productive resources to genealogists, and do that through the podcast. It's absolutely free. And I actually have a second podcast called Family History, Genealogy Made Easy. And then the multimedia end comes into the website, where you'll find the blog if you like to read. You're going to find the videos if you like to watch and learn that way, if you're a visual learner. We try to meet people wherever they are. And of course, I write books and I travel the country and sometimes the world speaking to groups, and absolutely love it. I am living the dream, I think.
Did you start Genealogy Gems as a podcast? Did you actually start your business with the podcast, or did you do speaking engagements or things like that beforehand?
I, through different gyrations over my lifetime, have done various speaking engagement. I'm a bit of an odd duck because I actually enjoy speaking to groups. That doesn't bother me at all. No fears that way. So I dabbled in that over my lifetime on various topics. And what I was looking for back in 2007 was some type of a vehicle to reach more people, to help people. I was so passionate and so, morning, noon, and night working on genealogy and loving every minute of it. And I was coming across some pretty cool stuff and thinking, wow, I'd love to share this with people. And in fact, I went into my local family history center and I shared something I had come across. It was a thing on finding immigration and naturalization records on the federal level. And the director looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, this is such a genealogy gem. Can I put this up on the bulletin board?" And I said, sure. So she made a photocopy. And as she's pinning it up on the bulletin board, I'm thinking to myself, it is a gem. I want to get these gems out to people, but maybe a handful will ever see it on this board. What's going to be my bulletin board? And when I heard about the creation of podcasts and podcast feeds, it hit me. Anybody, anywhere, could potentially speak to anyone around the world. And that's my bulletin board. And from that, I've never looked back.
Especially in genealogy, you're way ahead of your time back in 2007.
Yeah, it was the old days. That was before Google owned YouTube. I got my YouTube channel and, started doing that because video production was actually something I was doing before the audio production. And yeah, that's why I say it was kind of the Wild West. But that's what's so amazing about it. It's not very often that a field, an area of endeavor pops up where you get to just make it up and create it. And there's not a lot of regulation snarling it up. We can really be out there and be at our fullest creative potential. It's awesome.
Did you know anything about podcasting at this point? Had you ever tried to do it before you got this idea?
No, never. In fact, when I came across podcasts in a tech blog, I thought, okay, I need to educate myself. How am I going to do this? I want this. And so I went to iTunes and I typed in how to produce a podcast. And I found a podcast on how to produce a podcast. And I will give a big hat tip to Jason Van Orden, who was the one who produced that show way back when. And he was just sharing what he was learning and figuring out along the way, and got to know him. He's actually interviewed me about my business, because in truth, not a lot of podcasters are really viable, successful businesses. A lot of people do it as hobbyists. A lot of people do it as an adjunct to their business. For me, it's actually turned out to be, a full business, and that's amazing. But he was instrumental just in teaching me. I'm out there, walking the neighborhood. I'm doing the dishes. I'm ironing. It was 24/7. After 30 days of saturating myself listening to all of his episodes and emailing him, about a month later, I published my first 15-minute episode.
Wow. I give you a lot of credit. It took me a long time to figure out this whole podcasting thing. And you obviously really just set your mind to it and made it happen. I guess I have to let things simmer as I'm figuring them out. But that's great.
No, in a sense, I look back at my whole life and I think this has been simmering for an awful long time. I don't think anything is for naught. And every element of things I've done in the past, I look back and I go, oh, that was preparing me for this. Oh my gosh, that was preparing me for this. And in fact, I feel strongly about reaching out. One, just starting. You just got to start. And then you got to reach out and build relationships. Jason was one. And then there was a gentleman who had just put out a couple of episodes. He only did 9, I think, total, the Genealogy Tech podcast. But that was Bill Puller, and I reached out to him, and we became quick friends online. And he was awesome. You know what he did? He got a box. He says, I'm done with my books. He had like 3 books on podcasts. They had basically just been written. He poured through them, stuck them in a box, and shipped them to me. And I sat there, and if I wasn't listening to the Jason's podcast, I was reading those books. And because it's like there's no time to waste. Got to do it while you're thinking about it.
And you mentioned how everything you've done kind of led into the next thing. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you were doing before Genealogy Gems came about.
Way back when, I was always interested in theater. So I was a theater major in college. We did some touring, and I actually got accepted to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And at the last second, turned that down because I wanted to get married and have children, which I'm thrilled that I did. But theater has always been kind of an interest, and that's the whole concept of presentation and making things interesting and exciting for your audience. So that certainly has played in. I certainly worked through the corporate world, part-time, full-time, throughout child-raising years. And organizational development and training in a corporate setting was one area where I just certainly learned a lot. Everything from how do you format a book to create a presentation, to do PowerPoint, all kinds of things I'm doing today. And then even, back in 2005, my family and I were selected to be on a reality TV show, and it was called Texas Ranch House. It was on PBS. It was an 8-hour miniseries. And it's interesting because that was right. I didn't know it at the time, but podcasts were being cobbled together in 2005. They were just starting. I had no clue, but I knew I wanted to reach people, and I thought the TV series would be a way to do that. So we did it. Turned out our producer was from MTV, and the whole thing, when you watch it, you just go, oh my gosh, this was like the pioneer days of reality TV, and it sure shows it. Our experience, though, on the other hand, was this phenomenal 3 months, $6 million genealogy Disneyland of living in 1867 out in the middle of a 400,000-acre ranch in West Texas, and truly getting this opportunity to walk in my ancestors' footsteps. But what was also happening at the same time was I was meeting and connecting with some of the best cinematographers in the business, audio professionals, directors. I was soaking in everything I was learning from on the production side. Even to once a week, they would take you up on a Mesa hilltop and sit you down, and they would interview you for an hour like they do with Survivor. And I really picked up a lot about interviewing techniques, connecting with people, getting the right lighting, videoing, the whole thing. So even though the whole experience as a final production was a huge disappointment to me, because I don't think they did it justice historically, they didn't do it. They focused on creating turmoil and making it exciting. And, that's not what people watch PBS for. So I have my issues with that. But But it was this amazing learning ground. And when it came out, it went live 2006 on PBS. And shortly thereafter, I ended up coming across the podcast and realizing that's what that was about. I remember asking God, I thought you were going to put me in this TV show and I was going to inspire and help people to be excited about learning about their ancestors the way I did in a real life experience. And it didn't happen at all. And what ended up happening was he was actually giving me this training ground. And now I do it, and it's completely my creation. It's not, oh, she's the Genealogy Gems podcast because she was on PBS. It was just the training ground, and it was important to keep my eyes open and know that we can't drive everything in our business. We need to be open and flexible and realize that there might be a different purpose behind what's happening.
Yeah, that's a tremendous experience that you had. And even though it wasn't the way you wanted, the experience is just perfect. I heard on a podcast recently someone describing how they had competed in a contest and they had come in number 2 and they were heartbroken because they came in number 2. Mm-hmm. But then they went on later in a different direction, and they realized that if they hadn't come in number 2, they wouldn't have pushed in a different direction to succeed again. So
exactly.
So sometimes when things don't work out, it's even better because you take that experience that you gained from that first time and you make it into the thing you really want to make it into, which is, of course, in this case, Genealogy Gems.
Yeah. I mean, I got the personal real life 1,800 hours over a summer experience that I wanted. That was completely fabulous. You don't see any of it hardly on the show, but it was amazing. From a historical researcher standpoint, I got more than I ever could have dreamed. From the ability to put out my message, it wasn't. But like you said, I think it's so much better that my message is completely my own and my business is completely my own. And it's not based on that I did that show. I thought that's what it was supposed to be. But good news, it all comes around. If you pay attention, don't fight it.
So in 2007, you're starting this podcast. You said, I'm going to try making a business of this. What skills did you lack when you started your business? Because there's more than you need to know than just podcasting. And how did you overcome that?
Well, to be clear, when I started the first episode, I in no way was trying to start a business. So this was about, I wanted to give back to the genealogy community first and foremost. And I know many genealogists, that's in their heart. We are excited about what we're doing and we want to be able to share anything that we might find that will be helpful to somebody else. The reason it became a business very quickly was I didn't want to pod fade. The truth is, if you want to do a hobby, you're going to have to pay for it. That's what my husband said anyway. And, it's not an inexpensive hobby, if you will, to do podcasting. I wanted good equipment. I wanted to upgrade from my little $10 Radio Shack mic. So I knew very quickly, probably within 3 months, that I needed to find a way to finance it. And that's where I thought, well, shoot. If I could have any business, I would want to be in genealogy. So why not? And monetizing it became critical. I'm actually very proud that I was able to monetize it. That's not a dirty word to do that. And the reason it's so important is because it keeps it viable. You'll go on to iTunes and you'll see lots of podcasts that just what they call pod fade. And you'll say, what happened? It was going strong and then all of a sudden there's no more episodes. Sometimes they come to completion, but most times they move on to something else because they can't make it financially work. So for me, what I lacked was just audio production, technical skill. And I have found over the years, I didn't know really anything about search engine optimization, which is SEO, which is how do you get found? That's important. To other things I do in my business, such as writing books and publishing. I knew I wanted to be my own publisher, and I didn't even attempt to put them out to other companies because I wanted to pull that in-house and potentially eventually publish other authors, which we're just expanding into. So those were probably the key areas. Video was something I had already done. I had been a drama director for our church for several years and actually had finally kind of brought in kicking and screaming video into their communications with parishioners because I felt it was an exciting new way to communicate.
And what about public speaking outside of the podcast? Speaking at conferences and things like that. At what point did you start doing that?
I was fortunate. I was invited by a company called Family History Expos at that time, that first year, probably 6 months into it. And they said, hey, we had somebody who's not going to show up at this conference and we have a booth. Would you like it? We'd love to have you come out and tell people about what you're doing because it's new. It's exciting. I said, I could pack up the car and go to Utah. Okay, I'll do that. So I packed up the car and drove to Utah and set up a booth. And I spent the next 3 days explaining 600,000 times what a podcast was, which was not that easy to do. As you know, it was a little complicated, particularly back then. But what I saw going on around me was this conference. And I had never been to a genealogy conference and realized this could be a wonderful supplement to what I'm doing. Certainly, first and foremost, I want to reach people around the world. And we just celebrated 1.5 million downloads since the podcast first started. So certainly we've achieved that. And that's been beyond my wildest dreams. But getting in front of people is an important way to keep my finger on the pulse of what people want and need and what excites them. And frankly, I just love genealogy conferences. So that has ended up being a large segment of my overall business strategy, and I love it.
Out of everything that you have gotten into with making the podcast a business, what was the hardest part of starting the business overall?
I'll be honest, for me, it wasn't hard. I come from an entrepreneurial father, and my mother is an artist, and it was funny. I just was with my father this week, and my daughter just got married, my youngest daughter. And so we brought a new member into our family, and we were talking around the table, and he said, we were looking at my little grandsons. I've got 2 little grandsons, 1.5 and 4. And he was saying, yeah, when Lisa was little, you take Joey and you add Davy, and then you multiply it by 10 as far as energy and just getting into trouble and getting into things. I was a very high energy. I've always been a high energy person. So, and I'm fairly fearless. So that part wasn't hard, but I do think the hardest thing that most people face is just starting. It is the hardest thing to do because there's so many ways we can think of to improve what we're going to do it better. I don't have the right stuff. There's 1,000,001 reasons why you can't start, and they're just all baloney. Just start. So while I think that starting is the hardest part for 99% of the people out there, for me, the biggest challenge in the first year was workflow. It was coming up with ideas, corralling those ideas, organizing them, getting them into the workflow stream, basically creating content, because content is king. It's everything. And good content, they'll listen. Lousy content, there's 1,000,000 other podcasts to choose from. So for me, I really wanted to have quality content that was worth people's time. I know how limited my time is. The fact that somebody would actually sign into the feed and take time out of their day to listen to me, I take that really seriously, and I want to provide them the best possible content possible. So working out the workflow, how am I going to come up with those ideas and keep organized and not lose them? Because sometimes a piece of content comes your way and now's not quite the right time, but I need to get that in the schedule. So I've had to really hunker down and get organized about that.
What did you do as your company started to grow? You became successful. People are listening to your podcast. People are seeking you out at conferences and stuff. One of the problems I'm having right now is as I'm doing more and more of this kind of thing, I'm finding it hard to do it all myself. Mm-hmm. What did you do when suddenly you were doing 2 to 3 times as much work as when you first started?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a really good problem to have. I really realized that labor is finite. And I would think that many people in your audience might not be looking to do what I'm doing. They would like a lucrative genealogy business, and maybe they're thinking more about along the lines of researching for somebody. But the truth is, your labor and your time is finite. And the only way to scale your business and grow it is to be able to find a way to multiply that time. In a sense, can you clone yourself? And I think that the next step is to be able to really identify sharp, quality people who you would be willing to share your baby with, because it is kind of like having a baby. Luckily, I used to be in human resources, so I have a lot of experience in interviewing and recruiting and spotting, I think, qualities that I'm interested in to be part of my business that I think that I would mesh well with. And so I've done that. And what I found personally was that when I bring in the right people, and I have people actually around the country who do part-time contracting work for me, you bring in the right people and they've got your back and they're invested in the business and the overall sales multiplies dramatically more than what the cost was of bringing the person on. So having faith in that is hard. It's really scary. And when you start having to be responsible for somebody else's paycheck, then that gets really scary. That's probably one of the most intimidating parts to me of having this business, because I take that very seriously. I got to pay their check. Before I pay me, I need to pay them. And I think that I've been pleasantly surprised that it always grows the business far beyond what the cost of bringing that individual person on is. So I would encourage anybody who feels like and that could certainly work for a researcher. And lots of researchers end up creating kind of a firm, and they have a couple of different people or people doing some of the legwork part that can really pay off.
What are your tips in terms of hiring? Would you hire people you know, people that are friends, or perhaps acquaintances that you know but they're not close? Would you hire people you don't know and interview them? What strategies seem to work well for you?
The thing that I really love the most is when someone approaches me, and I can tell very quickly whether they actually know what I do or not. If they've spent any time on the website, if they're passionate about what we're doing here at Genealogy Gems. And in the occasions where I have people that I've brought on, they have come to me, and one of the first people came and said, would you be willing to take 20 minutes out at this conference and sit down with me and just mentor me? I have some questions, and you're doing things that I can only imagine I would love to do. And so I did, because it's a give and take. And we sat down and we talked, and I realized that she shares my passion and some of my philosophies, and she was looking for some work. And then I said, I always encourage people, send me something. You don't know how many people have contacted me. Oh, I think I would be terrific as your sidekick. Why don't we just do this together? And then when I'll say, okay, send me something, and they never do. I told you, starting is the hardest part. But the proof is in the pudding and output. And if somebody takes the time and crafts something and shares it and follows up with me, then they're already showing the skills that I need in this kind of a business, because I can't babysit anybody. So I've been very fortunate that some quality people have been attracted to what we're doing and have really shown themselves in the pursuit of wanting to work with us. So that, to me, is the best interview I can do. It's not sitting down and having them come up with pretend answers that they think I want to hear.
Interesting. Nobody's come up to me yet.
That's because they know you're doing it awesome. And you don't need anybody.
No. I'm tired, man.
I know. Well, and sometimes it's, I give them credit for saying, hey, I think I could be your partner. I think I could do this. And you wouldn't believe how many people have done that, but almost nobody follows up. But the people that do are very special, And then people oftentimes, it looks and sounds great. They just don't they quickly come to find out the time involved and the attention to detail. And then that's not for everybody. I don't blame them for that. So they will, though.
Yeah.
Don't you worry.
I will give a quick shout out to Sandy Goodwin. She's a woman who lives here in Massachusetts. And not too far, I think she came to one of our holiday parties or something. But I've known Sandy for a long time. And she kind of came up to me kind of shyly, and she said, oh, I've started a podcast. Can I ask you a few questions? Mm-hmm. She has no idea how excited I was to hear those words, to have somebody in my own state that was doing the same thing as me. And it's just been absolutely terrific to have somebody going through what I'm going through at the same time. So So that's pretty cool.
And as you grow and get bigger, you have to keep doing that. To me, that's the give and take. And there's no way that I would be at the success level I'm at without the people who actually bothered to take the time, who were further ahead than I was. So, that never ends.
Yeah. And, it's just a great lesson for all genealogists, no matter what side of business, whether you're doing, whether you're speaking or writing or doing client work, that give and take is so critical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know a very well-known personality that I think most of your listeners would know, and I'm always encouraging that person, you need to put it out more. Don't be afraid to give away your knowledge for free. And they're terrified that means, well, they're not going to want to buy my books. They're not going to come to me. No, they will. See, the more you give back, people respond to that and they start to trust you. And then they realize, well, I don't want to figure this out. I want to learn more about what she's doing. And they will eventually buy from you if that's what you're, So I would think even for a researcher, there'd be this fear of, oh, well, I don't give anything away without my hourly billing. I think there's a balance there that, you do have to kind of prove yourself over and over again. We all do. And I have always experienced that when I've given content and assistance for free, it's come back tenfold. And, what goes around comes around. So I would encourage that just as a way to grow your business.
Well, and that's a great segue into the next question. And, how do you balance your time between paid work and volunteering? It's one thing to do that. And we want to encourage everyone to share their knowledge for free and give ideas and help away for free. But how do you balance your time in terms of what you need to get done in addition to all the volunteering?
Right. In my personal situation, in a sense, my volunteer time is the free podcast. It's writing the blog, totally free. It's the YouTube channel, totally free. You can spend lots of time with me and my content and never spend a dime. My hope is you'll love it and you'll want more, and many people have. So that's fabulous. And it keeps us afloat so we can produce next month. So I, again, found that I do want to give back, and that would be the way I could do it, while at the same time, in a sense, creating a wonderful basis for the company, in a sense, the sales funnel, if you will. The sales funnel being that at the very top is the big end of the funnel, and that lots of people will come in there through your free offerings and your assistance. And as they funnel down, they'll eventually spend money with you, and that makes your business successful. So I guess I haven't really ever sat down and said, okay, I'm going to spend this percentage of time doing these items. What I've tried to do is I started doing almost totally, everything was free, and then eventually built the business and have been able to streamline the free activities so that they take less time. And I've gotten better at them. And I'm much more, it's much more kind of self-fulfilling. It's not difficult at all now to come up with content. And I've got some mechanisms in place to do that. So it hasn't been a numbers thing for me. It's been kind of what feels right, which is kind of a mushy answer, but that's the best I can do.
But don't you say, well, I want to write one blog post per week at the minimum or something like that? Don't you set goals for yourself like that?
I didn't get really conscious about that until about 2 years ago. It was just about, I worked from morning till night. Please don't let me be very clear. I worked from the moment I got up until the moment my head hit the pillow for years. I kind of still do that sometimes, but because I love it, and I loved it then. This is not something for the faint of heart, and it's having your own business is a time-consuming endeavor. That's why it's so important to do what you love. But it's funny. You might be surprised, but I actually do pay people to create some of the free content, because in the end, that does feed the business and bring people into the business, and hopefully that they'll make spend money as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I didn't get really, what's funny? I'll give you one tip. This is totally something that I struggled with. I kept thinking, I have to have brand new blog articles. I have to have a brand new video. I have to have a brand new items that were not covered on the blog in the podcast. And by following somebody outside of the genealogy community and how they were structuring a very similar type of a business, it hit me. That's not what she's doing. she's actually using it as a workflow because people learn in different ways. Some people want to watch videos, but they're not going to listen to the podcast, or vice versa, or they're not going to read, but they're going to listen. And the truth is, it never hurts to have good stuff reconfirmed and reaffirmed through another medium. So when I finally figured out good content can be moved through all the various channels, boy, that freed me up to do more. And that's why investing in paying somebody to assist me with some writing content, I know that's a huge investment in other elements. It's going to get spread all over.
I think it's so smart to think of blogging and podcasting and YouTube is different, because I know podcast audiences certainly are kind of unique in their culture with
Yes.
listening when they drive or when they exercise, or people become really devoted podcast listeners. And I went through this transformation myself. I didn't understand it all. I used to podcast actually before I was a podcast listener. Mm-hmm. And then I became a podcast listener, and then I became addicted to podcasts. And that's my preferred form of content now. But some people prefer just to read blogs, and other people prefer just to look at YouTube videos. So I so get what you're saying about that. So.
Well, I taught a class for APG that was on video marketing last year. And this brings back the same concept. Was people, now I had a room full of people who were not trying to do multimedia like I'm doing. Most of them wanted to be researchers in some capacity. And my point to them was, okay, you may not have the same channels that I do, but you're creating content because you are doing research for people. And don't hesitate to ask your client, may I use this as an example? Is it okay? If you want me to, I can change names, whatever you want to do. But research that you do can become marketing content and volunteer content, if you will, because you can repurpose that into a blog post, into a short video, into sharing just one little thing that you learned or something exciting that happened for one of your clients. And all of that becomes support marketing material. Don't think that you need to go and write this totally separate commercial and come up with some video on YouTube or something to try to get your business out there. You have the content in the research work that you're doing for your clients. Get their permission. You could even put it in writing just to feel comfortable that everybody knows in what way you might be sharing. But you can always make it an anonymous thing and still share some of what you've been experiencing in your own business and the exciting revelations that are happening for your clients.
Great ideas. I've got 2 more questions for you, so I don't want to keep it too long. I want to just touch on social media. Social media has really boomed in the last couple of years. So I'm imagining that when you first started, which actually was around the same time I started, but I was just doing research, social media wasn't as critical to our lives. And I think it was 2008, 2009 when I got on Facebook for the first time. How has social media transformed your business? How have you changed the way that you interact with everyone because of social media?
It's a good question. I'm active on Facebook. I'm not the most active person. I could not possibly spend the time on Facebook that others do and still make everything else happen in the business. So I touch base. I don't use it as a personal vehicle. People friend me. I've got lots of friends on there. I see it as it's another channel, if you will, for somebody to reach me and reach out to me and for me to, communicate with them. But I'll be honest, I think it's a fabulous community. I encourage people in my classes to get involved with Facebook. Even if you never post a single personal thing about yourself, there's a wonderful genealogy community on there, but it's a finite community. The truth is, and in fact, there was an infographic that just came out today, and they were talking about silver surfers, people who are over 50 and what they're doing in terms of social media. And yes, they're out there, but they're substantial, but they're still a fairly small fraction. And they may not be using it so much on the business or genealogy. A lot of them are just starting off with, sharing pictures of grandkids and stuff, which is something that's fun to do. So I do have the sense, in a way, I'm talking to the same finite group. Facebook's growing. I'm getting, ads all the time. We have a Facebook fan page for Genealogy Gems that's interactive. That's been really fun. I love, but it's just one way that I interact with them. I probably far more interaction through my newsletter than I do through Facebook. Although I encourage them in the newsletter to share items, because that is a way to, in a sense, volunteer. If you see a great article, if you hear a great podcast, if there's something that works for you, you should be sharing it. Click the F button for Facebook and get it out there to other people and let them know about it. Because that is a way in a very quick amount of time to make a difference and have a voice. But I am out there. I'm on channels. I think it's a great community type of an effort. But I have actually realized in the last year or so, I'm going to spend less time focused on that because I think I'm talking to the same people all the time.
All right, last question here before we hit the lightning round.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the most fun project that you've ever worked on that you can share with us? And you should be able to share with us because you're not really doing client work. So a speaking engagement, a particular podcast, a really great conference gig. I know for myself, because I'm a Louise Cooke diehard, one of my favorite interviews was the one you did with the woman over in England who was analyzing the bones from King Richard.
Yes, Terry King.
That was my personal favorite. But I want to hear what your favorite is. She
was awesome. Do you know that she did my husband's DNA?
Well, I know because there was some kind of family connection, and that's how you met her.
It's funny, I spoke at Who Do You Think You Are live in London probably 3-4 years in a row. I skipped this year because I'm doing a cruise of the British Isles next month. And my husband's like, you can only go over the pond so many times a year. So we're going to do that instead. This is our 30th anniversary. That's our big anniversary this year.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you. So I was talking about this, and I had just recently connected with somebody who was part of the Cooke line, because my husband's family's from England, and she connected me with Marcus Cooke. And next thing I knew is I went to speak at Who Do You Think You Are? And in the front row, these people, and they're nodding, and they're smiling, and they're just so attentive. And I'm like, oh, they're just so nice. Well, afterward, they came up, they're all Cookes, and we're all related. And they had, she'd gotten the word out, and we had this amazing family reunion sitting in the concession area of Who Do You Think You Are live in London. And Marcus is a professor with the University of Leicester, and he works very closely with Dr. Terry King, who happens. And in fact, the first thing he asked me was, can you swab your husband's cheek? Because I want to get all this DNA on record. And so we did that, and that was awesome.
Love that story. Love it.
It was fabulous. Some of my other favorites, it's really hard to pick because I've had some really fun highlights. Talking to Lisa Kudrow, my gosh, she spent a half an hour with me, and I was just amazed how gracious she was to spend that kind of time just one-on-one, because a lot of times after that they got into these big conference calls, and there'd be many reporters on the line when they were promoting Who Do You Think You Are, the TV show. But she did it. She was so cute. She's like, oh, you're Lisa Louise? I was always called Lisa Louise. And I said, oh, is that your middle name? She's like, no. I'm like, well, she's as funny as she played Phoebe on TV. And so we just had a blast. She was great. And I can tell you, do you have time for a really quick story?
Sure, go ahead.
One of my early projects was a video. It's called Socks to America. And it's just a silly, funny video in a Ken Burns kind of a style. And it's on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Genealogy Gems. There's lots and lots of videos there. Well, one morning I woke up, and some of my best content creation time happens in my jammies, flat on my back, laying and staring at the ceiling. And I woke up and I said, I really would love to do a video. And Socks to America, which is about, a 5 or 7 minute video, streamed into my brain, literally frame by frame. I knew exactly what it was. It was based on sock puppets, doing the immigration story of sock puppets. I know it sounds ridiculous. I had so much fun. I got up, put this thing together. By 5 o'clock, I think I had it finished that day. It was just one of those ultimate go in the zone and never come out for 10 hours. And I've had so much fun sharing that. And I still get emails to this day of people who just laugh and just think it's hysterical. And that's one of my passions too. I think it's something a little different. I try to bring to the genealogy world, which is a passion and fun, because I feel like it needs to be fun too. And that's why I got into it. And I know that's why a lot of other people got into genealogy. So
Well, I am going to have to check that out as soon as we are done here today, for sure.
Who knew there was a video about sock puppets going from Sockland to America and their trials and tribulations?
Let's take a quick break to hear a message from the Association of Professional Genealogists.
Hi, I'm Darcy Hind-Pose, APG Board Member, Awards Committee Chair, and member of the Youth Committee. Do you know a student and/or young professional who aspires to a career in genealogy? The Association of Professional Genealogists invites applications for its Young Professional Scholarship, which gives free registration and reimburses the winner for up to $1,000 for travel and lodging costs incurred when attending APG's annual Professional Management Conference. The deadline for submissions is July 22nd, and more information is available at www.apgen.org. The winner will be announced in August 2014. The future of genealogy depends upon fostering relationships among genealogists at all levels and supporting young professionals who bring fresh perspective to our field.
All right, Lisa, we're going to change things up a little bit now. We're going to quicken the pace as we enter the lightning round.
Thanks.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on.
What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
Sustainability. How was I going to keep it going? How was I going to pay the bills?
What's the best advice you've ever received from someone else?
My husband. He is my absolute guru that I go to. And when I get convoluted up in the Facebook noise and the genealogy world noise and everything, I go to him and he looks me straight in the eye and he says, don't you focus on others. You go focus on your listeners. That's who you love. They love you. Now go do your job. That's what I do.
That's great advice. What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
Start. START. Write it up on your wall. Do it. You got to take action. My best piece of advice is doing nothing is doing something. It's failing. It's ensuring that you're going to fail. So you need to start. And may I suggest that you also make sure that of the few things that you do, at least one of them has something to do with generating income. You're going to need that income to continue to feel confident to keep doing what you love.
Do you have a productivity tool or an app that you love that you can share with our audience?
My big raving passion now is Evernote, which I know is getting more and more popular in genealogy. I first interviewed the VP at Evernote, 4 years ago, I think. Thought it was a fabulous tool, and I'm glad to see it taking genealogy by storm. That's probably our most recent product is Evernote Quick Sheet. We have Evernote for genealogists, and it doesn't have to take over your life. And you don't need a book to figure it out. Something like a quick sheet. Just what I tell people is take 1 week and promise yourself you're not going to write another sticky note or a piece of paper just for 1 week. And by the end, you'll be completely sold as to what it can do for you.
And I just want to toss in there that one of the things I love about your podcast is you go to these companies and talk to them. Because I heard the interview you did with the guys from, what is it called? Flipboard. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was so cool. And I was sitting there going, wow, she went there. She's talking to these guys. And we're getting to hear this conversation.
Do you know why I do that, Marion?
No.
I do that because I get so many companies contacting me and sending me press releases going, oh, I'm the next new bright, shiny thing. And the truth is they're not all great. Just because they have genealogy in their name doesn't mean it's worth your time, your effort, or your money. That's what I try to do with Genealogy Gems. I mean it when I say it. You will never hear me talk about anything, as many inquiries as I get, if I haven't vetted it and I don't believe in it, because your time and your money is limited. And the truth is, a lot of these companies, their business plan is 2 years, I want to be bought out by Ancestry, period. They really don't care about the customers. So just know.
And Flipboard and Evernote, of course, they're not interested in Ancestry. And TechSmith.
Exactly.
Now, this is the lightning round, but just tell us your little TechSmith story, because that was just another awesome little gem. So it's a business gem in a way. So share with us what happened with TechSmith.
With TechSmith, they saw me at Roots Tech. And I can't remember now. I guess I emailed them. I didn't tell them what I do. But anyway, he saw me doing Google Earth for genealogy up on the demo stage. And he said, that is so freaking awesome. And are you embedding our videos? I said, yeah, absolutely. I use Camtasia and I embed the videos. And they ended up taking me out to dinner, and we've started to build a relationship there that I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you there will be things happening. And it's exciting because, again, we are trying to accomplish tasks in genealogy. We're not just looking for genealogy companies and genealogy apps. So if you stay focused on what your task is, what you're trying to accomplish in your research, I don't care where the solution comes from. And I find more often than not, it's coming from outside of the genealogy world. So that's where Evernote and Flipboard and TechSmith kind of come into play. And that's why I go and I meet with them, because I want to find out, because they're not thinking about genealogy. I try to put my little genealogy cap on and say, okay, how can we leverage this? How can we do this? But they've been fabulous. And they actually had me on their 24 hours with 48 people. I don't know what it was, but all night long they did videos that were live, and they interviewed me about my business, and it was really fun. They're an awesome company.
Yeah, and if you follow Lisa's newsletter, you would have been notified because you posted the link to that video, and that was really cool.
It was so neat, and it was neat to see that, genealogy was on the radar of the 20 and 30-somethings at TechSmith. They thought that was cool enough to talk about and actually produce. They actually came to my home, and we shot that video last summer, I think. It was really neat.
All right, I know you're not really into social media, but it's part of the lightning round. So what is your preferred social media channel if you could only pick one?
If I could only pick one, it'd be Facebook. And I don't mean to sound like I don't like social media. I'm just saying I realize from a business standpoint, I would be foolish to only focus on social media as my mechanism to reach people. But Facebook, I think, is, if you're going to be one place, that's the place.
If you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be? And it can be anything. It could be a business book. It could be anything you want.
I would recommend, it's called The Martha Rules, and this is Martha Stewart, and it's called 10 Essentials of Achieving Success as You Start, Build, or Manage Your Business. She was the one, I was listening to it on the airplane, and again, I love, like you, I'm a podcast addict, and so I got the book on audio, and I'm on the plane, and it was listening to her that turn the key in my head. The only way I'm going to be able to multiply myself is I'm going to have to start bringing in talented people. And, she's a creative, dynamic, energetic kind of a person. And she's like, it was a mistake to think I could do it all. And I very early on leveraged the talents of other people. And that's why she grew so fast. And so to me, that was just eye-opening. It's a great read. It's a great book.
I'm going to have to check that one out. Our last question is a new series that we're doing on the show, and it's called Tips from the Pros, where you, being the pro, provide 3 quick tips. And for your topic, how about we pick podcasting? So say for somebody out there listening who has no idea what is involved in starting a podcast, what are 3 quick tips that you could point them to get started?
I wish I could point you to Jason Van Orden's podcasting podcast. I don't think it's still on, but I would Google his name, Jason Van Orden, Aorden. He's just really good in terms of online business and podcasting. Let's see here. Another tip for podcasting would be go ahead and go to iTunes and do a search on how to podcast. I would also do this at YouTube, because there'll be some software and things that you need to use. And I think that listen to a podcast for inspiration and then go watch it step by step on YouTube to see what's the mechanics of making it louder and removing noise and, adjusting your channels and all that kind of stuff. YouTube is really the go-to place. That's another place that should be the number one social media place. And it's not with the genealogy audience, but it needs to be, because that's where everybody is. And a third thing for podcasting, if you really think you're going to be in it for the long haul, go ahead and invest a little bit more money and get a nice microphone up front. I've actually taken down my first 20 episodes, remastered them, and we're republishing them as a blast from the past, but it's all vanity because I wanted them to sound better. My original microphone was kind of cheesy, so we fixed that.
Give our audience one parting piece of advice and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
Well, I think I already gave you my one-liner, which is doing nothing is doing something. Sometimes we think we're fooling ourselves that, oh, well, I'll just take this time. No, you're doing nothing. And what you're actually ensuring is it's never going to happen. So do something. Don't be afraid to fail. We've all heard that. It's so true. And you can get in touch with me at genealogygems.com and also lisalouisecooke.com. They both funnel to the same place. And you'll see there my website and all the different various ways in which you can connect with us over there are all through the menu. So you'll find the video channels, and we do have a premium membership. So I always say, if you enjoy the free stuff, we'd love to have you as a member. That's what helps finance all of that. And there's a lot of really cool exclusive content. I do webinars and things for other folks, and we videotape those full-length classes, my most popular classes, and they're part of premium membership. So there's a lot of really cool, fun stuff there. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Friend us on Facebook.
Lisa Louise Cooke, thank you so much for coming on the Genealogy Professional Podcast today.
Thank you, Marion. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks to all of you for listening.
Wow, that was such a super discussion with Lisa Louise Cooke. She shared with us so many tips and advice and stories. She talked about how she got started in podcasting with the Genealogy Gems podcast and what she actually went through to learn to podcast and how she relied on other people. And she also talked about her background in theater and acting. And one of the things she said was that all of her experiences were a training ground for what came next, which is what she's doing now with Genealogy Gems podcast. And I just thought that was such an amazing thing. And when you think about it, it's so true. You know, everything that we do is not in isolation, but it's cumulative. And we can take all the best parts of everything we learn in our life and use it to our benefit with what we're doing right now. She also talked about how she turned her podcast into a business, and, you know, at first because she had to cover the cost of the podcast, and it just grew from there. She also talked about how she is fearless in business, and she kept saying over and over again, you know, just get started. Don't do nothing. Don't set your course on a road for failure. Do something, get started, work towards your future. And she also gave some really good tips for content creation and workflow. And I hope that you'll really think about some of the things that she suggested, because she just packed this discussion with so many great ideas and really great stories. Before I let you go, I want to just give you one quick action item. And I just want to touch on what Lisa said about experiences being a training ground for what comes next. All right, so your task this week is to think about what you've done in your past. You know, every week when we have a new guest, I ask them, you know, what did you do in the past and what strengths did you bring from those previous jobs, those previous experiences? Well, I want you to think about that yourself. What have you done in the past? It could be completely different from genealogy. And think about how different experiences that you have had previously can work to your benefit now. I think you just need to think about what those things were and how you can incorporate them into your new career as a genealogy professional. So make a list of everything that you've done as a job, and then think about the qualities and the things that you actually did in those jobs and what were your strengths, and see how you can incorporate strengths from those positions to what you're doing now so that you become even better in your profession today. All right, well, that's it for this week. Until next week, so long.